Straight ahead on this edition of Perspectives, the latest attack in Brussels has raised questions about foreign policy. How will the U.S. respond? And most of all, what's the response of presidential candidates given the fact of the latest attack in Brussels? That's coming up on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Darren Hyman.
Let them know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let them know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Darren Hyman. Of course, we want to thank you for joining us. You can check us out every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. If you have Verizon Files, you can check us on Channel 33. And, of course, on the World Wide Web at bronxnet.org. And there you can click on anytime and find out. You can also hit me up on my personal page on Facebook, Darren C. Hyman. There you can find out about some past episodes of the show, what we've got coming up, and give us your perspective because, honestly, that's what makes the difference when it comes to this show. Coming up front and center on this edition of Perspectives, we're talking about foreign policy. The terrorist attack in Brussels has raised questions about foreign policy, specifically the United States foreign policy. But it also brings to light presidential candidates. What exactly is their foreign policy, and is it realistic? Well, our guest in studio is here to share a little bit about it. He is a political commentator for us here at BronxNet, but also he's an adjunct assistant professor at York College and the Borough of Manhattan Community College, graduating from Harvard University in 1999 with a bachelor's degree in government. He also earned his PhD in political science from the City University of New York and writes frequently about American politics on Facebook blog, Mariah Starr, PhD. Good to have you, Mariah Starr, who's here and our guest. Good to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, let's talk about the latest attack in Brussels, Belgium. Much of America actually woke up on that fateful day, finding out about the attack in Brussels.
Yeah.
And once again, the threat of ISIS. And for people here in New York specifically, you look back and you remember 9/11.
Yeah.
And you say, foreign policy, we got to do something about this ISIS thing. From your perspective, let's talk about the United States in dealing with the whole Brussels situation.
Yeah.
President Obama was very clearly talked about and criticized for not coming back. Let me get your thought on that one, first of all. He was at a baseball game in Cuba.
Was, yes. And he was right to be at a baseball game because from Obama's perspective, ISIS is not a threat to the U.S., whereas Cuba is a much more relevant foreign policy achievement that he's accomplished in the past year or so. So when you think of ISIS, we're talking about a terrorist organization, the self-proclaimed Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. They're not actually a state, nor are they Islamic, but they're a terrorist organization that has been able to use the artwork and kidnapping to finance their operations. And they've been losing ground in the Middle East. So they've expanded to Europe. So they expanded to Paris, they expanded to Brussels. And what they're doing is they're trying to radicalize and take advantage of the Muslims who are in Brussels and in Paris. Mm-hmm. These cities have Muslim populations that have been sort of deprived of the economic advantages of the European Union. So they are kind of ripe for the picking in a sense. But there's really no foreign policy that can prevent that from happening. There is police work you can do. You can work with Interpol. But the U.S. has had a policy of saying when it comes to the self-proclaimed Islamic State, you have to first name it correctly. And the Arabic word is Daesh. It's an organization that does not deserve the respect of the international community. It does not deserve to be called an Islamic State at all. So it's a war of words more than a war of actual troops on the ground. And so that's the first issue. The second issue is that when it comes to this group coming over to the U.S., they can't do that. They have no ability. We have such secure borders since 9/11. The only thing we have to really worry about is sort of homegrown terrorists.
So
that
you
people
feel
are
no,
self-radicalized.
so you feel no threat of an ISIS attack here in the United States?
I feel no threat from the organization. I feel a threat from people here who decide of their own will, their own volition, to act on behalf of ISIS, but ISIS won't be telling them to do it. They'll just be doing it by themselves. And we've already had terrorist attacks by white men who go and shoot up schools and churches. So that is a real threat here. It's a matter of how do you protect us, given that we have civil liberties? We have the Fourth Amendment, we have the Fifth Amendment. How do you protect us without violating civil liberties? And that's a real important problem there.
You talked about Cuba. How important is it to the Obama legacy and foreign policy?
It's critical. So Obama actually has a doctrine. His doctrine is the U.S. is the strongest militarily around the world, the strongest economically around the world. No other country even comes close to us. So Cuba and other countries like North Korea, Iran, they actually require engagement with the U.S. because engagement will help make them responsible members of the community, the international community. So it's actually very important to include Cuba in this process. A 50-plus year legacy of embargo and Cold War relations, it wasn't working. Obama acknowledged that, and in fact the Pope was the one who organized this in the first place. The Pope, Pope Francis, he was able to get Raul Castro and President Obama to get together to get a détente going. And so we've had this rapprochement, and now you see American businesses going to Cuba. You see, immigration going to Cuba. That's the real accomplishment right there. And it's important to see that as one of the game changers of the Western Hemisphere. It's much more important than whatever is happening over in Europe with regard to ISIS.
Well, we heard when the Brussels attack took place, we go back and we look back on the screen, we found the GOP very intentional about criticizing the president about both being in Cuba for the game and not really rushing back. But let's take a look at their foreign policy for a minute, because out of the GOP's foreign policy, let's talk about Donald Trump first and foremost, since he's the front runner.
Yes.
Your take on his foreign policy?
Donald Trump and foreign policy do not belong in the same sentence together. They don't exist. Donald Trump's sense of foreign policy is he's going to make the best deals possible. For him, the entire international sphere is one big real estate development. It's a deal. So he's going to sell American power to other countries, and he's going to use our credibility to sell it. So it's sort of like me going to you and saying, hey, you know what? You want protection? Pay me for it. You know who else does that? The mafia. So he wants to turn the U.S. into a rogue state that is engaging in protectionist practice, using the mafia logic to transform the international system. So it's not a foreign policy. This is using foreign policy to make money for the U.S. He's a businessman. That's how he thinks of foreign policy. But it's not actually how foreign policy works.
He has very serious thoughts about Iran and China.
Yes, he does. He thinks Iran got a better deal than the U.S. did. He thinks Iran has been allowed to pursue nuclear weapons and that they won't be stopped by the treaty. But he also believes that the U.S. should be making business deals with Iran, even though the U.S. has an embargo against Iran. So he really does not understand how foreign policy works. To Donald Trump, foreign policy is one big money-making machine. That's it. And that's not really what foreign policy is. China also, there is actual trade agreements between China and the U.S. So that would be more in line with Donald Trump's thinking. But the challenge with China is that they have the second largest economy in the world. So China benefits from the American security umbrella over Taiwan and Japan. So Donald Trump's sense of foreign policy is, let's make the most money. That's it. And that's really not foreign policy at all. So talking about Donald Trump's foreign policy is sort of like talking about Donald Trump's opinion on Santa Claus. it just doesn't matter.
He talks a lot about China, but the truth is his ties are made in China. I saw it in Century 21, actually posted in Facebook that his ties were made in China. He told somebody once that his ties were made in Bangladesh, but the reality is his ties were made in China. And not only that, they were on clearance for $9.95. You can find it, Century 21, $9.95, Donald Trump tie. I'm not endorsing, I'm not saying, I'm just telling you just the facts that you can find it. Listen, we'll be back with more perspectives coming up after the break. We're going to talk a little bit more about foreign policy, take a look at the Democratic side, and take a look at the foreign policy initiatives put forth by Secretary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders. We'll be right back.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hi, I'm David Lesh, legal correspondent to the Morning Show Open. If you have a legal question that you'd like me to answer, please send me an email at davidlesh@bronxnet.org, and I will address it on our Ask Your Lawyer segment.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
And we're back here on Perspectives. Darren Hyman here with you, talking with Mariah Starr, both adjunct professor as well as our political analyst here at BronxNet, sharing a little bit about the foreign policy of the presidential candidates. And when we talked on the Republican side, we didn't really get a chance to talk a little bit more about the rest of the Republican candidates. But I do want to jump over, since we'll do equal time, equal fairness. Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side, she's the front runner. A lot can be said about her. She still is being heckled over Benghazi. How real is her foreign policy, and how much do you think the Democrats really are believing in the policy making of Hillary Clinton?
They believe, to the extent that she has the experience, that she, yes, has credibility there. She was Secretary of State for 4 years. She helped to pivot the U.S. from Europe to China. And so they really believe that she would be an effective foreign policy agent. I mean, the part of the job of the President of the United States is to be commander-in-chief and head of state, to meet with foreign leaders. Clinton knows foreign leaders on a personal basis. So she would be very credible in terms of helping to establish the best relationships with France, with Russia, with China. Benghazi is important, as you said. And the challenge with Benghazi is it kind of caught the administration off guard. And so it is legitimate to wonder, okay, what was she doing there? But the Republicans have admitted that Benghazi was a trumped-up charge to bring her poll ratings down. So for us to consider Benghazi as a legitimate problem for her, it would be us buying into the partisan rhetoric of politicians. Benghazi is a problem to the extent that, yes, she was caught off guard, and she responded in the best way she could. So she's already admitted she made mistakes. They let it go, and she shouldn't have done that. Does it mean that she'll be a bad president as a result? Probably not.
Okay, so walk us through her versus Bernie Sanders. We've heard very clearly what some of her policies and foreign policies are.
Yeah.
When you talk about Bernie Sanders, what are we seeing?
We're seeing very little. The thing with Clinton is she actually has a foreign policy approach with regard to helping women, helping children, human rights issues. Bernie Sanders doesn't really have much experience with foreign policy or much knowledge of it. What he does have, though, is a very clear understanding of how trade affects our economy. And so, kind of like Trump, Sanders would ideally use foreign policy to improve the U.S. standing economically around the world. So think of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, this treaty that Obama hammered out that would create a framework for trade among Japan, China, Korea, I mean, the entire Asia-Pacific region. The Democrats hate this framework because they say it sells out American workers. Sanders has been telling the Democrats that this is a very bad deal. Clinton was initially supportive of the deal. Then because Sanders was going to be popular, she changed her mind and said, yes, this is a bad deal. So what we're really looking at is Sanders leading the way on helping to maintain fair trade, not just free trade. That's the big thing. Both Sanders and Trump want fair trade, not just free trade. And so what it's really a question about is globalization. How do you define globalization? Who does globalization serve? And how does the U.S. protect its jobs from going to China, India, or even Mexico and Europe? So this is a real thorny problem, and no one has the answer to yet.
All of them just left Washington not too long ago, within the last month or so, talking out of IPAC and having the opportunity. When you talk about Israeli relations and the talk of Israeli relations, you heard Ted Cruz come out. How'd you fare his speech?
Well, his speech, typical bombastic. I mean, Ted Cruz is the essence of the sort of conservative purist politician who is saying we're going to make sure that Israel is protected from the Palestinians. I mean, Ted Cruz does a very good job with the bombastic rhetoric, as does Trump. So what I find interesting about Ted Cruz is that his policies are tailor-made to appeal to the Christian values people. And for Christians, Israel must be defended because the existence of Israel is a strong portent for Armageddon. So in order for Christ to return, Israel must exist. And so it is important for the U.S. to defend Israel against the Muslims in the area. So Ted Cruz really exemplifies that approach. And Trump does the same thing. And so what AIPAC really wants is for America to be on the side of Israel, to defend Israel against Iran, against Egypt, against Syria. It's the lone Jewish state in a Muslim neighborhood. So it needs protection as a result. Clinton knows that too. And so the Jewish component, the Jewish part of the electorate, is really trying to convince all the politicians to defend Israel at all costs.
When I saw Donald Trump speak there, I really cringed again because I felt as though that, and I felt as though you had a moment to really connect, and you kind of like swung for the fences, but you actually whiffed. Agree, disagree?
I think he whiffed, but the crowd loved him. I mean, Donald.
I don't know if the crowd loved him, right? I don't know because you heard a lot. You didn't hear a lot of, the great cheers that you normally would hear at a Trump rally with supporters.
True.
You heard people give casual applause. You heard people give, at certain junctures, heavy applause. But I think even failed at the end when he turned about and talked about his daughter. And and marrying he's going to be Jewish.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, did he really hit home?
Well, they didn't boo him.
Right.
So I think what we have to admit is that AIPAC always invites candidates in to speak, and they're always going to give even polite applause just to say thank you for expressing your viewpoint. In terms of their endorsement of Trump's views, probably not. And so one of the challenges we face is, is Donald Trump on the side of Israel? The truth is we don't know, because one of Donald Trump's fundamental principles of foreign policy is that the U.S. must be unpredictable. It must be a rogue state in a sense. And by being unpredictable, the United States can gain leverage to force other countries to do our will, to get better business, basically.
When we talked about these particular candidates addressing foreign policy, the question comes back, voters go in 2016. How much is foreign policy going to be at the forefront of a voter's mind when they hit the polls?
It depends on if there's a terrorist attack in October. So if there is no terrorist attack on U.S. soil, for example, if there's no more San Bernardinos, if there are no more self-activated radicalized Muslims attacking American citizens, then Americans will largely forget it. Let's say, okay, we have the police aspect, it's controlled, and so instead they will make their decision based on national policy, maybe even on the Supreme Court, if we don't have a justice by then. But if there's a terrorist attack in a major U.S. city, let's say mid-October or early November, it'll be a major part of the vote. And that's why it's so unpredictable. You just don't know what will happen.
I was talking with some other anchors and hosts about this very same issue, kind of agreed on a certain extent to say, listen, if there is a major attack, the problem is that it has to be in a major city, and there would have to be major casualties in order for voters to kind of respond. This is what some of my political guys are saying too, that unless there's heavy casualties, there may not necessarily be that attentiveness to foreign policy when I'm pulling the lever. Is the biggest thing the economy?
Yes. The biggest thing is the lack of jobs out there, the underemployment of people. I mean, the official unemployment rate is about 5%, 5.4% in the country. But it's not the actual employment rate. You have unemployment really about 10 or 15% because people have stopped looking for work. You have so many people who have advanced degrees who are underemployed. And this is one of the major challenges we face. I mean, I ask my students all the time, how is the economy for you? And they admit it's just not working. In a place like New York City, it is a subpar economy. The only parts of the economy that are really working for people are healthcare and technology. Other than that, people can have advanced degrees and be forced to drive an Uber because they have no way to make real money. So we have the hollowing out of the industrial base, and this is the main reason why Donald Trump supporters are backing him, because they want to bring the jobs back.
Gotta take a quick break and come back with more final comments from Mariah Starr. We'll be right back right after this.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family?
This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry.
Go along, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Finishing up our conversation with Mariah Starr here, and we thank you for watching us here on Perspectives. But listen, as we get ready to wrap up the show here, let me just kick the can down the block a little bit more. As we move towards November, what can we anticipate seeing?
I envision three things happening. First, the Republicans have a contested or brokered convention. If Donald Trump gets the nomination, then the Republicans will field a third candidate. Perhaps Condoleezza Rice, perhaps John Kasich, perhaps Rick Perry, but it'll be a candidate who they think will be acceptable in the general election. The Democrats will then meet in August, and they'll be in Philadelphia, and it'll either be Clinton or Sanders. If Clinton's a nominee, then Sanders might run as a third-party candidate too. So you might have 4 people running simultaneously, and you might see not just a matter of the different parties, but you might also see Supreme Court hearings along with that. So you have the possibility of the parties breaking up over the next few months, which would be really amazing to watch, because you have the Supreme Court nomination, you have the parties, and you have the far left and far right splitting off from the two parties and creating what we haven't really seen since 1824, a four-party race.
Does it give credence to the fact that people say America is more fractured now than ever before?
It does. In the sense that Americans have almost no ability to come to common ground on what's most important. The last time we had a fractured race like this was 1860, and Lincoln won that, and it led right to the Civil War.
You said 1860?
1860, yes. So we have had a situation where the fracturing has happened. I doubt that there will be states seceding if either candidate wins, but you might be seeing rioting in the streets of Cleveland, rioting in the streets of Philadelphia. You might be seeing lots of people going out and causing lots of damage as they realize the process does or does not work for them.
You sound like Donald Trump for a second.
Oh, I'm not advocating anything. I'm just saying there's a lot of frustration, anger, unrest in this country, and the divisions are there. I'm hoping it will not come to that. I'm hoping that you're going to be seeing a country that comes together peacefully, endorses a non-violent transition, and that we have a stable political system.
As Martin Luther King once said, riots are the voice of the unheard, and hopefully everybody's voice will be heard by the time we move down to convention season. Mariah Starr, thank you so much for coming and sharing your views and letting us know what's going on.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
All right, Mariah Starr, adjunct professor at both York and Borough Manhattan Community College, and also one of our political analysts here at BronxNet Television. And we're getting ready to take you out of show, actually, because we're out of time. So we want to thank you for joining us. I want to tell you, make sure to stay tuned to Perspectives every week, Channel 67. You can catch a brand new, fresh episode of Perspectives. For all of us here on the set, I want to thank you for watching. Until the next time we meet, stay safe. Share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in someone else's life.
What's your perspective? Let 'em know.
What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm NASCAR driver Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.